So this painting is titled The Prendergast Homestead. It was made by J.W. Bell in 1876. And the story of the Prendergast mansion, the Prendergast homestead, begins with the history of James Prendergast, the founder of Jamestown, and how he came to be settled here. James's father, William, was born in Kilkenny, Ireland, on February 3rd, 1727. James's mother, Mehetabel Wing, was born on March 20th, 1738, in Dutchess County, New York. William had a farm in Pittstown, near New York City, and through the years, Mehetabel gave birth to 7 sons and 6 daughters. When the family decided to move west, they traveled through Kentucky, Ohio, western Pennsylvania, and Chautauqua County, looking for a place to settle. At the time, there were very few settlers here in Chautauqua County, and provisions were scarce. So they went on and wintered in Canada with relatives. Not finding Canada to their liking, they returned here in the spring of 1806 by way of Batavia and purchased 3,337 acres of land near the Chautauqua Institution, or what is now the Chautauqua Institution, and settled there. Their 5th son, James, studied and practiced medicine for a time, was a judge, and later became the first postmaster in Jamestown, the town of which is named after him. In 1807, James married Agnes Thompson. In 1809, he bought 1,000 acres, which eventually became Jamestown. He accidentally came upon the site one day while searching for some of the family's horses, which had wandered away. In his quest for the missing animals, he found a Native American encampment at the outlet and was impressed with the area's pine trees. He traveled through the Conewago and Cayuntone valleys looking, and it was possible at that time that he envisioned a settlement in this area. The horses were found in a grassy meadow where Kennedy now is. In 1811, William Prendergast, James's father, died. He's buried near Stedman in the family cemetery. James built a log cabin in Jamestown in 1811, but then it burned down in 1812. His mother, Mehetabel, died that same year, and is also buried at Stedman, along with some of her children. In 1814, James built a small home on the west side of Main Street in Jamestown, which was then known as the Rapids. From 1814 to 1832, James provided quarters for his school and paid the teachers' wages. He bought cattle from Henry Clay in Kentucky in about 1819. He also purchased 3 slaves, and they drove the cattle up to his estate in Cayuntone. There is no exact mention of when the house in Cayuntone was built. It must have been around this time, or somewhere between 1820 and 1830, certainly before the 1830s. The brick house was constructed in one large square section. 4 rooms up, 4 rooms down, with a cupola on top, with a south wing of 12 rooms extending back considerably beyond the main point. So, upper, lower, and then this would most likely is the south wing there. In 1836, James sold his real estate in Jamestown and moved to Ripon in 1837. His wife died 2 years later at the age of 68. In 1841, James settled on his farm in Carroll, now in Cayuntone, and consisted of more than 1,200 acres, and was originally point for registered cattle in Chautauqua County. James died here November 5th, 1846, at the age of 83. In 1847, Alexander inherited the estate and lived there. He married Mary Morton of Westfield in April of 1847. The large brick house was plainly furnished, but Mary's great love for flowers was responsible for the grounds being transformed into bowers of beauty and fragrant loveliness. On June 18, 1848, a son, James, was born here. He grew up and became a lawyer in the firm of Green, Prendergast, and Benedict. He died at 31 from complications of a minor surgery in Buffalo. The mausoleum at Lakeview Cemetery contains his ashes. The Prendergast Library was built in his memory, paid for by rent from a property at Main and 3rd Streets in Jamestown, with the addition of $30,000 that is, donated by his mother. Also born to Alexander Mary was a daughter, Catherine, or Kitty, on April 2nd, 1854. Kitty was exquisitely beautiful, lively, cheerful, and apparently healthy. Yet she died young, at 10 years of age, in Marquette, Michigan. St. Luke's Church in Jamestown was built in her memory, and her portrait hangs in a room there. Her grandfather, James, was an ardent Episcopalian, but he also helped other churches. The estate in Kyantone has been the site of one of the granaries of the Six Nations, and also the site of a Native American village. Many arrowheads have been found there, and also an iron tomahawk made by the French and given to the Native Americans to scalp the British with. It was authenticated by Gilbert Haggerty, director of the Royal New York Museum. At first, the Prendergasts were going to build across the road from where the house now stands. When they started digging, though, they discovered a Native American burial ground. Not wishing to disturb it, they built their house in a different place. Alexander also owned a large brick townhouse at 100 East 5th Street that was built in 1875. This is where he died suddenly of a stroke in 1885. Mary, his wife, sold the estate in 1887 to Dan Griswold and William Townsend, a distant cousin of the Prendergasts. In 1910, Dan Griswold sold the farm to Harry Griswold. In 1850, Harry Griswold sold it to Homer Preston, who in turn sold it to George Giesemann in 1934. Giesemann sold it to Leon Johnson in 1947. Leon Johnson sold it to Alfred Hagman. He then sold it back to Leon Johnson in 1962, and Leon Johnson sold it to Courtney and Marion Phillips the same year. Sadly, in 1939, the main part of the house was destroyed by fire. Only the shell of the brick wall was left standing. The south wing, over here, was water-soaked but saved. The fire was blamed on defective wiring. The chimneys were located on the opposite side of the structure from the apparent origin of the fire, in the cupola, up here. The main fuse box was in the cupola, atop the southwest corner, and all electrical lines leading to that point. There were fireplaces in the rooms that burned. Fireplaces were the only source of heat in the early days. So this has been the history of the Prendergast Estate, the homestead in Kyantone. The homestead of the founders of Jamestown, and the founders of the James Prendergast Library. I do want to say thank you to Jean Brustrom, whose article, The Old Prendergast Mansion in Kyantone, in the November 30th, 1985 issue of the Post-Journal, provided large portions of the historical data for this video. I'm Mr. Oliver from the James Prendergast Library, hoping you have a good day.